themselves attached to words only. They drown themselves in dualism. They are ruined themselves and ruin the ignorant. When they see my doctrine which is liberated from all error, they see truthfully, they do not harm the leader. When Mahamati asked what constituted tathagatahood, the Buddha answered, they are tathagatas and Buddhas, who understand the twofold egolessness, discard the twofold hindrance, keep themselves away from the two forms of death, and from the two classes of evil desires. Whether they be sravakas or pratyekabuddhas, they are equally tathagatas if they thus qualify themselves, and in this respect, the Buddha says that he teaches only one vehicle impartially carrying all classes of sentient beings. The twofold hindrance to the realization of the inmost truth is the hindrance of evil desires and the hindrance of knowledge. We may say, the conative hindrance and the intellectual hindrance. The two kinds of death are death of discontinuity, and death of mysterious transformation. The first is that which takes place on a corporal plane, and the second is a form of subtle transformation proceeding in the consciousness of a higher being. By the two kinds of evil desires are meant, those that are stirred in us by the agency of ignorance, and those that follow from this fundamental evil. One of the significant teachings of the Lankavatara concerning the discourse of the Tathagata on the truth of Buddhism is its insistence on the distinction between the truth itself and an exposition of it. This follows from the Mahayanistic attitude toward the use of language in Buddhism, which is this, that meaning is to be separate from words, for the fatter by no means exhaust the former, and there is always something that is escaping which can never be adequately expressed in words. Of course we must use words when something has to be transmitted from one person to another, but words are mere indication and not the thing itself. As the Sutra says, we have to resort to the word lamp of discrimination to enter into the inner truth of experience which goes beyond words and thoughts. But it is perfect folly to imagine that this lamp is everything. Point 2. The Lankavatara is quite positive about this, for it says, by merely following words and making discriminating attempts to formulate a proposition concerning the truth as it is, a man falls straightway into the bottom of hell on account of this very proposition. Again, when the ignorant, not comprehending the secret meaning, endeavor to take hold of the knowledge of existence with words, they find themselves hopelessly, like the silkworm, in a cocoon spun by their own false discrimination. Thus Mahamati in this sutra is always anxious to ask the Buddha concerning the relationship between the truth itself and its expression in words. For he is convinced that when this relationship is made clear, the bodhisattvas including himself will have advanced many steps ahead toward the attainment of supreme enlightenment. This relationship is known in the Lankavatara as that between siddhanta and dasana, that is, between realization and instruction in words. This most excellent realization goes beyond words and letters of discrimination. For it belongs to the realm of non-outflowings, and is characterized with the inwardness of perception whereby one enters upon the stage of tathagatahood. By destroying all the philosophers' erroneous views and evil ways of thinking, one shines forth in the light of inner truth. As to the Tathagata's instruction in words, it is expressed in the 9 divisions in which is given the doctrine of non-dualism transcending the categories of oneness and otherness, of being and non-being, but the main thing in them is to lead sentient beings by skillful means to the end after which their own believing hearts are striving. There are the truth of realization and its instruction in words, the inner perception and its preaching. Those who see well into the distinction will not be influenced by mere intellection. In the truth itself there are no such discriminations as are cherished by the ignorant. In non-being there is emancipation, indeed. Why do they not seek it there? They that are addicted to reasoning? When we survey this world of things made, we see nothing but a continuation of birth and death. And the ignorant are nourishing their dualistic views, and because of their perversion they fail to see the truth. This one alone is the truth. Nirvana is not to be taken hold of by thinking. The world as subject to discrimination is like the stem of a plantain tree, it is maya, a shadow. There is no greed, no wrath, no folly, nor even a person. From desire, indeed, there rise the skandhas, they are all like objects seen in a dream. This distinction between realization and discoursing is repeated further below in the sutra in almost identical words. The latter is meant for the ignorant, and the former for those who earnestly discipline themselves in it. The statement that the Tathagata uttered not a word since his enlightenment 8 refers to the truth of realization. Reference has been already made once. Add will be made again later, this time more in detail. To the Buddha's teaching of one vehicle, in which all the Buddhists who see into the truth inwardly realizable are carried, no matter to which of the triple vehicle they may belong. Because of one universal vehicle, all the Buddhas, Tathagatas, and Arhats are now said to be of one nature, and even that they are all one, i.e. of one substance. In the Mahayana Sutras, allusions are frequently made to Buddhas of the past, present, and future, and they are an immense number even at present, abiding each in his Buddha land, which fills the universes seen and unseen. Though the Lankavatara does not make any positive affirmation, we can quite reasonably infer that all these Buddhas are really one Buddha, revealing himself in time and space and thus mysteriously multiplying himself infinitely, altogether beyond the possibilities of our limited thinking. This is the conclusion we naturally come to when the idea of samatha is pursued logically. Mahamati asked the Blessed One, "In what secret sense speakest thou in the assembly of thy being all the Buddhas of the past? And also in thy former births of thy having been Kingman the three, or the elephant, the parrot, India, Vyasa, or Sunetra, on such and such occasions?" Said the Buddha, "We talk of this in the assembly because of the secret teaching of fourfold sameness, that I was in ancient days the Buddha Krakuchanda, Kanakamuni, or Kasyapa. What are these four? Sameness in letters, sameness in words, sameness in the body, sameness in the truth attained." By sameness in letters is meant that the title Buddha is equally given to all the Tathagatas, no distinction being made among them as far as these letters, Buddha, go. By sameness in words is meant that all the Tathagatas speak in 64 different notes or sounds with which the language of Brahmana is pronounced, and that their language sounding like the notes of the Kalavinka bird is common to all the Tathagatas. By sameness in the body is meant that all the Tathagatas show no distinction as far as their dharmakaya, their corporal features and their secondary marks of excellence are concerned. They differ, however, when they are seen by a variety of beings whom they have the special design to control and discipline. By sameness in the truth is meant that all the Tathagatas attain to the same realization by means of the 37 divisions of enlightenment. That all the Tathagatas are one in the truth they have inwardly realized is readily understood, but how are they one in their bodily form? This is an important teaching in the Lankavatara. The conception of an originally abiding essence of things may help us in this and also of that of the Tathagata Garbha. The identification of this dharmata idea and the Tathagata Garbha has not been effected in any explicit manner in the Lankavatara. The relation between the thus identified somewhat and the dharmakaya is not also determined to such extent as to permit us to say definitely that the Buddha's dharmanaya is in each one of us, that we are manifestations of dharmakaya, and, therefore, that we are Buddhas even as we are, and, finally, that mind, Buddha, and all sentient beings these are of one essence and nature and substance. The Lankavatara is not a systematist treatise devoted to the exposition of a definite set of doctrines, but a mind containing all sorts of metals still in the state of ore requiring analysis and synthesis. It is full of suggestive thoughts which must have been fermenting at the time in the Mahayana thinkers' brains and hearts. The two great schools of Mahayana Buddhism, the Madhyamika and the Yogacara, lie here in an incipient stage of development and differentiation. While all the Tathagatas are one in the Dharmakaya, they may be variously known to various classes of beings, who imagine their object of worship to be exclusively their own. Indeed, there are so many synonyms for the name Tathagata that we cannot begin to enumerate them all. The wise know this well, but the ignorant may refuse to acquiesce in this way of understanding even after they have been instructed. Hence the following remarks in the Lankavatara. Said the Buddha, "O Mahamati, listen to what tell thee. The Tathagata is not the non-existent, he is not the holder of all that is unborn and undying in all things, he is not one who waits for conditions. I declare him to be the unborn one, whose synonym is the dharmakaya, who manifests itself as it will. This is beyond the understanding of all the philosophers, sravakas, pratyekabuddhas, and those bodhisattvas who have not yet passed the seventh stage. It is like Indra, who is known as sakra and puramdara. It is like the word hasta, for synonyms of which there are kara and pani. It is again like tanu, deha, sarira, meaning the body. Like prithivi, bhumi, vaswndhara, meaning the earth. And also like akasa, gagana, meaning the sky. Any object may thus be known under several names, though they are not to be adhered to as designating several different objects, each with its own irreducible characteristics. No false judgment must be formed here. I come into the hearing range of the ignorant in this sahaloka world in hundreds of thousands of 3 asamkayas of names. And they talk to me under these names, yet they fail to recognize that they are all my own appellations. There are some who call me the self-existing one, the leader, the remover of obstacles, the guiding one, Buddha, Rishi, Bull King, Brahma, Vishnu, Isvara, the originator, Kapila, the destroyer, the imperishable, Nemina, Soma, fire, Rama, Vyasa, Sukha, Indra, the strong one, or Varna. There are others who know me as immortality, emptiness, suchness, truth, reality, real limit, dharmadhatu, nirvana, eternity, sameness, non-duality, the imperishable, formless, causality, teaching the cause of Buddhahood, emancipation, truth paths, the all-knowing, the conquering one, or the will body. While I am thus known in hundreds of thousands of 3 asamkayas of titles, not only in this world, but in other worlds, my names are not exhausted. I am like the moon casting its shadow on water, I am neither in it nor out of it. Those who know me will recognize me everywhere, but the ignorant who cannot rise above dualism will not know me. They pay respect and make me offerings, but they do not understand well the meaning of words, do not distinguish ideas, the true from the false. They do not recognize the truth itself. Clinging to words of teaching, they erroneously discriminate that the unborn and undying means a non-existence. They are thus unable to comprehend that one Tathagata may be known in many different names and titles. This infinite multiplicity of names in which the Tathagata is known to all beings, though they do not themselves realize the fact, betrays the pantheistic tendency running through all the Mahayana schools of Buddhism, and at the same time leads us to the conception of the transformation body of the Buddha. There is no mystery in the Trikaya doctrine of Buddhism. If the Buddha is compassionate enough to see suffering beings, there is no other way to satisfy his heart's desire than that of the dividing himself into so many different forms and approaching sufferers. The latter, however, may think that they have what they want exclusively in the form revealed to their minds. In fact, the Tathagata is not at all dividing himself. If it seems so, it is due to the discrimination of his devotees. The transformation body is thus a creation on their part, it is not an emanation of the Tathagata. I have said that he had to divide himself to satisfy his heart, but this is no more than a conventional and human way of speaking. Therefore, the Sutra compares the activity of the Tathagata to the moon reflected in water. The moon is divided into thousands of reflections, as many indeed as there are dipperfuls of water. This is due to the presence and working of the original vows in the hearts of all the Buddhas, and the working is altogether effortless and without any designs. And yet how purposeful it all appears. This is one of the principal messages communicated in the Lankavatara. We now see that the transformation body is most intimately connected with the paramidhana of the Buddha, and this praladhana is the spiritual echo or response to the suffering of beings. When sentient beings begin to be conscious of the contradictions within themselves, they have an intense desire awakened for some sort of unity or harmonization, which may be called emancipation or enlightenment or salvation, according to the point of view taken of the situation. This intense desire thus awakened in the hearts of sentient beings cannot remain without calling forth some response somewhere. Because the feeling is the cry that issues forth from life itself, and if there is anything living in the dharmakaya of the Buddha, He can never remain in the quiet of samadhi. He must move out of his lotus seat. This moving out is, in the terminology of Mahayana Buddhism, his pranidhana, or vow. The Lankavatara, as one of the Mahayana literature, does not forget to touch on this subject properly. The sutra is devoted to the elucidation of the inner truth to be realized within oneself, but to neglect the mentioning of the pranidhana would be a grievous fault on the part of the writer. The whole significance of the idea of the pranidhana is in short this. The bodhisattva also realizes the inner truth as attained by the sravakas. But because of his compassionate regard for all sentient beings and of his original vows which are now astir in him, he has no heart for the bliss of cessation and for the bliss of self-absorption. The Lankavatara alludes occasionally to the 10 vows of a bodhisattva which he has made in the beginning of his career. They are principally concerned with the bodhisattva and not with the Tathagata. But they may be taken at least in their principle as concerned with the life of the Tathagata as well. Amitabha's 48 vows mentioned in one of the Chinese versions of the Sukha Vativayaha Sutra. Akshobhya's vows in the Sutra of the Land of Akshobhya. Kshitigarbha's 10 vows in the Sutra of the Vows of Kshitigarbha. Vaishagyaguru Vayaklurya Prabhaza Tathagata's 12 vows in the Sutra bearing his name, Avalokitesvara's vows in one of the chapters in the Sadharmapunarika, etc. are also many developments of this idea of prandana. As regards such subjects as the Buddha's power being added to his devotees or its moving them from within and enabling them to act in this way or that way, they have been treated although somewhat briefly in the previous part of this work, that is, pp. 202 to 205. 5. Other minor subjects. Among other subjects which are treated more or less briefly and in a detached way in the Lankavatara, the following have been selected as important. With these I hope the sutra has been explained somewhat thoroughly as far as the main ideas making up the grand fabric of Mahayana Buddhism are concerned. I have purposely neglected making reference to the Samkhya and Lokayatika views refuted by the author of the Lankavatara. These are valuable when the historical position of the sutra is to be determined, which will be attempted later when a complete English translation of it is published. I have confined myself in this book to the study of such Mahayana thoughts as have engaged the attention of the writer of the sutra. He has by no means exhausted all the Mahayana doctrines. Perhaps the sutra was compiled too early for that. One thing, however, I may mention at this juncture is that one of the ideas most distinctive as Mahayanistic has not received the slightest attention in the Lankavatara, not even bare mention of the term. By this I mean the doctrine of turning over individual merit towards attaining enlightenment, or towards helping others to do the same thing. That is known as pariniyamana, transferring of merit. Parhaniyamana follows from the conception of parijanidhana. In fact, paralayana, mahakarmiya, upayakausalya, and adhisthana are all most intimately related ideas. When any one of them is awakened and set to work out its own consequences, the rest inevitably follow it. The Prajnaparamita Sutra, considered to be one of the earliest Mahayana literature, constantly refer to paralnamana. And also in the Avatamsaka and in the Sukhavativayaha it is one of the characteristic terms. Seeing this, it is strange that the Lankavatara is altogether silent about it. The subjects to be mentioned below are one vehicle.